Welcome back to this week's episode of Green Enterprise, a partnership between my company, Digital Venture Partners, and Black Enterprise Magazine, where every week we have a conversation with a prominent Black cannabis executive that we think is making great progress, but more importantly, creating inroads and architecture for more of us to come into the space and find sustained success. This week I have with me MacCalvin Romain, the head of product at Lantern. How you doing today, my brother?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing great, man. We had a conversation about a month ago, so I've been super excited to follow up and just kind of pick your brain about, cannabis, the tech space, and just what's developing nationwide for people. But what I would love for us to do before we get into that is you give us an idea of your background before you got into cannabis as a professional.
Yeah, of course, man. Well, thanks for having me. So I'm originally from New York, born in New York. Can't claim it though. I was raised in Boston, first generation Haitian American. And so background's always been really, focused on hustle and grind and make sure education was the primary focus, just as the natural immigrant story. So with that, was fortunate enough to get to Boston College, studied information systems and communications, was really fascinated in tech and all things consumer, all things focused on consumer. And so, getting out of school, wasn't sure exactly how I was going to meld those specific interests. But what made the most sense was kind of start out in the tech, really focused into the digital advertising area. Started my career out as a product manager, worked, a lot of consumer experience companies, Fortune 500 companies, building out consumer sites, mobile apps, really understanding consumer journeys, also working with highly regulatory environments. We had like some banking clients, we had some insurance clients. And so it was really focused in on how to build those experiences where you had to really navigate the law creatively. Did that for about 4 years, jumped over and got my MBA at the University of Michigan. So did spend some time out in the Midwest. Did some work while in Michigan, did some work on a venture fund, Wolverine Venture Fund. So did a couple years doing that while also getting my MBA. So a lot of venture capital experience, really understanding early stage startups before jumping into graduating and then going to Chicago for management consulting. So I did management consulting for a couple years. While I was management consulting, do want to highlight there, I did some projects with the cannabis sector as well as alcohol. So it was definitely planted the seed in my mind, no pun intended, around the folks that were at the table that were engaging in these cannabis conversations, very different than the folks that were engaging in cannabis that I saw growing up. And so definitely pointed my mind of, a lot of people that I typically would not have seen. We got a lot of not many people of color. In fact, no people of color were sitting at the table talking about how they were going to enter the market in America, how they were going to build out these large MSOs and these multi-state operating opportunities. And that definitely planted the seed that, a couple of years later, after I left consulting, I ended up joining Lantern, cannabis company, digital e-commerce company. I was the fourth employee. And the focus for me was to be able to take a lot of my past experiences, but then also making sure that, a person of color had a seat at the table and build out, really great delivery e-com company, but then also making sure that we are carving out pathways to support social equity, which is something that I knew from the conversations that I heard earlier were not part of any discussion. So I wanted to be the change that I wanted to see. And Lantern was a great platform for that.
The beautiful thing about your experience is you had prior knowledge in three important things within cannabis, which is consulting, tech, and venture capital. Any type of startup or professional coming into the space has to be great at least two of those things. So what were some of when you jumped over to cannabis, what were some of the similarities that you found that your experience contributed to, and what kind of surprised you about the space once you came over?
Yeah, I think there were probably like two things that were very similar. So I mentioned earlier the regulatory environment that I had faced while working as a product manager, primarily in banking and insurance. Very similar, where each state's regulatory or the regs in each state can vary. What language can be shown in one market will differ from another market. And so being able to navigate that and building very flexible tech solutions was super important. And so that's been very, similar in cannabis, where, some of these laws are being written every day. We're having conversations, lobbying, really trying to figure out what's the right approach for a given market, for the retailers, for the consumers, for the couriers. And as part of that, being this non-plant touching software that's supposed to support and build a marketplace for all these different parties, it's really important for us to understand what the regs are and then being able to build out an experience that solves the consumer needs, but then also serves these other parties. So that's very important. I think the other piece of it as well is, thinking about from a consulting perspective, there's so much change is happening. So there's a constant need to reiterate and evaluate the strategy that each specific license type or even every person within the value chain, how they participate, engage, and how they work with one another. That it's really important, at least for me, one of the strategic advantages I have with my past experience is being able to absorb the information that's coming in, understand what our place is in that, but then also see how everyone else is going to move on the chessboard and say, all right, this is how someone could take advantage of this specific reg. This is how someone might take advantage of this specific license. And what can we do to add value? And what can we do also to support social equity in a way that doesn't ultimately end up with them being boxed out, or potentially provide some more resources so they're able to navigate that as well. So they're ahead of that learning curve.
Okay. And taking a step back, when people hear, when people like us hear about the cannabis space, they more so think about, agriculture or retail. They don't really think about all the ancillary things that have to go well or need to be filled in the space. So like, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur like yourself, or a business person like yourself, who is great at many things, but don't necessarily correlate them to cannabis yet, right? So how would you advise them to kind of find a place within the space with what they already do well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super interesting. It's a super interesting question. And I think it's definitely a misconception where, there's definitely a very clear focus on the actual product, which, from the cultivation agriculture perspective, yeah, the person that's growing it, there's a lot of specialty that comes with being able to develop, grow products, specialized strains, and build out, differentiated and very good quality product. But then there's so many other pieces of the value chain that if you think about any other entity or product that is in the market, whether you're talking about clothes and fashion or consumer electronics, you don't need to be the scientist that's developing the headphone to also find an avenue to be able to create the website to sell that, to find the distribution channels and putting on the shelves. So, if you're looking at Shark Tank or any of the other businesses, not everyone is the person that is building and manufacturing the product. There are people that are primarily there for distribution, people that are primarily there for sales, people that are developing the e-commerce platform so that folks can customize these products. And so I think if you are someone that is working in a specific industry and you're a very key specialist in what your field is, there's probably an avenue that you'll be able to transfer a lot of those skills within the cannabis space. And so for me, I was able to do that primarily with my tech and consulting background, as well as venture, which just happened to be something very important given where we are in the sector. But there's definitely opportunities, whether you're in the marketing sector, in the marketing profession, your operations, customer experience. This is a brand new, well, it's not really brand new at all, but as far as where we're moving, I got to catch myself there. As far as where we're moving, there's just so much opportunity. And I say brand new is that there's so many brand new roles that are opening up as many of these companies are beginning to, establish more of a, 2022 foothold of applying tech to what they're doing to help them scale. There's just so much opportunity where they need folks to have expertise in these other specific fields to help them grow outside of just the agricultural piece, which is the beginning step.
Okay, perfect. And another part of your expertise I want to touch on that I get posed with the most from Black people, which I'm sure you can agree, is how do I raise capital? How do I get an investor? I have a great idea. I need some operating capital, right? So what advice from your experience do you give to people who come in with an idea or a product and they're trying to get funded in cannabis? What's the reality of what you see versus what the theory is when people walk into trying to raise capital?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that I mentioned this before. My view is really about the offense and defense of like the approach of entering the industry. The reason why I say that is because from the offensive perspective, there's so much to do to really get a business off the ground. You really want to make sure you're educated on the laws, want to make sure you're understanding of exactly what you're trying to build, really have a very clean business plan, very clean operational model, be able to convey your story narrative and really build that cohesive team, especially early stage. Folks want to see your ability to execute is almost as important as what your dream is do you have the team able to do it? And then have a very clear plan of what capital you need to be able to execute that and what you're going to be using that, what the use of proceeds will be for. So from the offensive perspective, that's really important. Once you put those cohesive elements together, it's much easier for someone to find you as a viable entrepreneur to be able to not only execute on your plan, but you also have enough wherewithal to be able to navigate the changes that will be popping up. On the defense side, it's really important to be confident in your numbers, to be confident in what your business plan is, because there's going to be so many people that will chop you down because of the predatory nature of cannabis. There's so little specialization, especially at the cultivation side, that existing operators, if you have cannabis experience, then like absolutely great opportunity for you to partner with folks to help you build out your businesses, whether you're partnering with a tech person, a business person, you're partnering with someone that really understands a given market that you want to enter. But you want to make sure that you're thinking through to some of the strategic investors that you're working through, and you're not looking just for capital because you need to get your business running in. You're looking for someone that, you know, is a relationship partner where it's, hey, I'm getting in business with this person. Are they adding value in the form of strategy? Are they adding value in the form of on-site around scaling a business? Are they adding value from a tech perspective? Or are they just giving me money and they're going to like buzz off and, you know, I'll get them their money in, you know, a couple of years when we blow up. You just want to be very clear cut on what you're looking for, and then making sure that that person fits a specific profile of what your business needs to grow.
I love talking to people like you because I literally just go repeat what you said and people think I'm brilliant. But moving into, you mentioned you were born in New York and you're from Massachusetts, like that's where you were cultivated. So
Yeah.
what's the landscape of cannabis on the East Coast? And the reason I ask that is most people, when they think about legal cannabis, they immediately think about California and Colorado and the culture of the West Coast and cannabis. And I tell Black people that it's different. The West Coast versus the Midwest versus the East Coast, they're all different in how they operate, how they package, how they brand. So what do you see on the East Coast developing for someone who's maybe in Massachusetts or New Jersey or New York?
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in the East Coast. So I think one of the really important things that, you know, I was fortunate enough to be, you know, have a part in or be able to experience specifically in Massachusetts is there've been a lot of initiatives moving social equity at the forefront of the recreational market. So the medicinal market was here. It's been around for, I think, almost 6, 7, 8 years. But the recreational market, you know, has been around for a subset of that. The delivery market and some of these other ancillary license types, these things are being introduced, but they are providing these carve outs for social equity entrepreneurs to be able to get some preferential, you know, access to these licenses or exclusivity to some of these licenses that allow them to be able to stand up their businesses, have, you know, maybe 2 to 3 years of runway before you have it open up for the general audience, which is such a great opportunity for some of these operators to be able to get a foothold in the market, be able to build out value for their businesses. And at that point, they can decide what they want to do. Do they want to continue operating on their own? Do they want to try to get some verticality and get some additional license types? Do they want to be acquired and try to, you know, build a really fat business and be able to exit or partner up with someone? So some of these opportunities in Massachusetts specifically are really important there. And I think one of the other key things is with that, and it's really, really important for the people of color here. Specifically, we've seen a lot of folks come together and use this opportunity to really think through not just what they're going to do today, but holistically when that 3-year time frame runs out, what they're going to do to make sure that they still a viable business opportunity for them. And so, you know, they created these, you know, specific groups and unions, which I think is like an awesome opportunity just to make sure we're collaborating and we're not, you know, going at each other from day one, which I think is awesome. And one of the things that we've done at Lantern is kind of build out some of these incubators where we're bringing in folks day one to, you know, giving them game, understanding how to build out, you know, business plans, getting them pro bono lawyers. And the main focus is just unblock all the things necessary to stand up those businesses. And once you see exactly what the opportunity is and you see what all the different hurdles that might impact your growth, you realize the people that are to your left and right, the Black folks that are within your cohort or people within the social equity designation, it actually behooves you all to make sure you're all growing at a really strong pace, because when the floodgates open, that's when things get scary, not the Black person that's like 3 miles down the road. Like, you want to make sure you're all thriving because there's so much opportunity right now. And I think Jersey, New York, there's going to be more opportunities like that since these markets are opening up, more licenses, like they're figuring out what the license, the protocols and regs will be for them. A lot of them are looking at Massachusetts as models. Massachusetts isn't perfect. There's a lot of things that we're all working through now, but it is great to see folks going in a direction on the East Coast where they're looking at social equity, they're prioritizing it in some way, but they're trying to find a way to make sure that it works for everyone. And then, hopefully there's no perfect model, but hopefully as long as that's part of the conversation, there is going to be much more opportunity for folks like ourselves to be able to figure out how to best navigate that.
And also, just to kind of drill down on, like, when you talk about a developing market, could you kind of explain what's the difference between trying to operate in a medical state versus an adult use state? I think a lot of people just think getting into cannabis is getting into cannabis, when in reality, like you said, the regulations really define clearly and crisply what you can and can't do. So what would you advise an entrepreneur in a medical state versus an adult use state?
Yeah, I think realistically, the business models are entirely different. So for the adult use states, the consumer profiles are a little bit different. You would expect there to be wide ranging. The gates to be able to purchase product is truly just being of age. And then you have certain limitations on the quantity that you can purchase. So the opportunity is really going to be based on like the market and how you view your segment that you're catering. As far as like license types as well, typically you'll see the adult use license process will vary. I can't say they'll be harder or not. They'll vary. It's just going to be something you'll want to be very focused on. But from a business perspective, the adult use sector is just going to be something where you're like, this is my audience, 21 plus. It can vary. There's some caps on what they can purchase. There's some caps on certain categories. But based on that, you want to sell as much as you can to as many people as you can. Medicinal side, they typically have either no caps or much higher caps. So you're really focusing in on folks that are, coming in with prescriptions, coming in with ailments. And so your really perspective is you probably have higher potency products that are there to support these consumers. And so you're probably less focusing on like the marketing blast, getting to many people as you can, but more so focusing in on building a brand or a company that's known for high quality products that serve their consumers, and really dive in a little bit more, probably closer to like a pharmaceutical business, whereas the adult use side tends to kind of veer closer to like a spirit shop and the alcohol sector, where it's 21 plus crowd, and there's a lot of more limitations that way.
Okay, great. And then also I wanted to pick your brain on how do you feel about the state of federal legalization, right? And do you feel like if cannabis were to legalize right now, do you think Black people are positioned to benefit from this, or maybe it becomes a little bit more difficult once large pharmaceutical wine and spirit companies come into the space? How do you feel about the state of federal legalization?
Really good question, and I guess I'll keep it real with you. I think it's definitely one of those things where there's going to be some good opportunity depending on your position, but there's going to be a lot of really scary situations and scenarios that could play out. I think there's probably the biggest risk, I think, in my mind is the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, in the East Coast, there's so much focus on social equity. And I think there's a lot of good work that people are doing to be intentional about how we roll out, how we roll out license opportunities, how we roll out, zoning, how we roll out taxes associated with that, and where the tax dollars are allocated. My concern is if you were to legalize it all at once and it's federally legal, the opportunity or even the incentive for some of these markets or states to want to have that very intentional conversation about supporting groups of people that were impacted by the war on drugs, specifically Black and brown people. I think folks might rush through that and not think through exactly how they can support those communities, how they can expunge records, how they can make sure that they're providing opportunities for folks that were doing this prior to this to be able to capitalize, build their businesses, tap into that expertise. so they can just open it up for the markets. General consumers, they'll be super excited to get it out there, and they want to make sure that people are able to purchase right away. But we want to make sure we're doing right by folks that, were there first, the folks that are part of that legacy market. And then also they want to make sure they're taking advantage of tax dollars. So I can see how the business aspects and the rush and drive to help consumers might be a big part of that. The other piece of it as well, which, I'd be crazy not to mention, is that there's just going to be a lot of institutional dollars that can pour into this. And then you're going to see a lot of the high cash money players coming into a green industry, no pun intended again, and just taking up as much shop, buying as everything they can on the monopoly board, which is this a concern you will have if you're not having this ability to build out this intentional carve out for folks that were, building out these businesses in jails for the same things. So I can say, if I had to summarize it, I'm probably a little bit cautious. I think there's a lot that we can learn on the East Coast that I would love to see folks build on. Like I said, it's not perfect, but I would love to see folks build upon that and have that be a part of the federal legalization conversation as well as a very clear, cohesive plan on how the tax dollars will be allocated and poured back into some of these communities that, were ravaged as a result of some of the war on drugs.
Man, I have to say that you are a well of knowledge. Like, I don't think you realize how much you know and how much applied knowledge you have that you can share. So I definitely appreciate you giving that to our audience as a consultant for free also.
Good, all good.
One thing I want to ask you, we talked about employment, and we both have projects within our respective companies where we're trying to diversify Black people coming into this space and not only getting into cannabis, but staying and growing within cannabis, whether that's as an entrepreneur or as a traditional employee. But I've become very cautious against just saying, come work in cannabis. I try to make sure people understand where to go and what is a positive, fruitful opportunity for them. So I don't want to say red flags or green flags, but what advice would you give to someone to say, like, don't just go into the first cannabis company that sends you an offer letter? What would you advise someone to look for to kind of identify a strong opportunity to go into cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, I really think folks should just look at any opportunity within cannabis just like any other job. I think the biggest thing that folks should do is just kind of remove the stigma at this point. If folks were able to kind of take a step back and look at just look at the people that run these businesses, look at some of the folks in power that are running these large multi-state operators, look at some of the government officials that have equity stakes, or even old government officials have equity stakes in some of these businesses, I think there would be less concern or even focus on, jumping into cannabis and what that might mean for their career or what that might mean for exit opportunities, and more of a look of just like, hey, does this company feel like they fit my values? Does this opportunity look like it fits my skill set? Do I think I could add value in this role? Do I think I see upward mobility? And so I really think looking through that really makes a ton of sense. And obviously, if you have, like myself, if you're passionate about the social equity components and have a very keen focus on what, how your company's position on social equity might play a role in how you feel coming to work every day, then yeah, absolutely add that layer in there, and then make sure that that's a part of your decision process. But to me, I look at my role at Lantern and the things that I do no different than any other company or job opportunity that I've had. It just felt like a perfect role for me at the juncture of my career, with the caveat that their position on social equity was going to be the difference maker. If I'm going to be in cannabis, I want to make sure that I'm doing right by my people. And so that's something, that's a personal decision for anyone. But I think, if you're looking at upward, what the upside would be, is just no different than joining any other startup. You can either join a company like, you join early stage Facebook because you think it's going to blow up, or you can join, a company that doesn't do so hot. And then you're just looking at it like, all right, well, I didn't evaluate that opportunity correctly. So, look at the company for what it is, look at the role for what it is, and make the most, best decision for yourself, career-wise and personally.
Man, thank you so much for your time, MacCalvin. I would love for you to leave our viewers with where they can follow you and Lantern on social media, and specifically where they can reach out to you if they have any more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm around on LinkedIn, MacCalvin Romain, Instagram, Mac_Romain, MAC_ROMAIN. You can also follow Lantern, get Lantern Now on Instagram. And so, yeah, more than happy to answer questions, emails, MacCalvin at Nima Ventures. It's a venture fund that I also run to support early stage entrepreneurs. So if folks have questions there, more than happy to reach out and just have that conversation. I'm early in this kind of early in the cannabis game as far as a lot of these markets that we're entering, and so I'm always happy to make sure I'm helping and supporting folks that are interested in taking the jump and hopefully alleviating some of the concerns people have when it comes to this really great opportunities that we're seeing open up.
Man, thank you for your time, my brother. I look forward to your continued success.
Of course, man. Appreciate you. Thanks for having me.